Okay, let's unpack this. We've all heard it, right? That classic advice. Eat slowly. Chew your food.
Yeah, sounds so simple.
But let's be honest. Actually doing that consistently in our busy lives, it feels almost impossible sometimes, doesn't it?
It really does, like trying to swim upstream.
Right. So the real goal here, I think, is finding practical ways, maybe even kind of effortless ways, to build healthier eating habits.
Exactly, because, while the speed of eating definitely links to things like digestion, feeling full, managing weight, our sources for this deep dive suggest maybe we're focusing on the wrong things sometimes.
Ah, okay. And that's where this research comes in, right? This isn't just a general chat. We're doing a proper deep dive into one specific study that looked at how we eat.
Mm-hmm.
But from an angle that might surprise you. It's not just about, telling yourself, chew more, chew more.
No, it's looking at what you're eating and maybe even how that food is presented to you on the plate.
Interesting. Okay, so what's the source material?
It's a study, pretty recent actually, published in the journal Nutrients. Came from a team over at Fujita Health University in Japan. Professor Katsumi Iizuka led the research.
Fujita Health University.
Yeah.
So our mission for this deep dive is to really, get into their work. What were they trying to figure out? How did they set it all up?
And the big one.
Yeah, what did they actually find? And what does it mean for you listening, what does it mean for your plate, your habits?
Well, Professor Iizuka and his team were tackling this really fundamental question. When you think about eating speed and how much you chew, what's the main driver? Is it the type of food you're eating?
Right.
Or is it maybe the order you eat things in? Like, should you have your veggies first? Or does it make a difference if you have them last?
That's a smart question because, a lot of diet advice does focus on that sequence, doesn't it? Eat your fiber first, start with protein.
Exactly. So this study basically puts that idea head to head with the actual, structure of the meal itself.
So how did they test this? What was the setup?
Right. So they got 41 adults, a mix of men and women, ages 20 up to 65.
Okay.
And each person came in on different days, and they ate 3 specific test meals, all in a controlled lab setting,
And these meals weren't just random plates of food, I assume.
No, very specific. They had pizza for one meal.
Okay, classic fast-ish food.
Yep. And then they had 2 versions of a hamburger steak bento meal, like a Japanese lunchbox.
Ah, right, with the different compartments. And why 2 versions?
That was the key for testing the sequence idea. So one time they had to eat the vegetables in the bento first. The other time they had to eat the vegetables last. The pizza was the contrast, the different type of meal.
Okay, that makes sense. But here's what sounds really crucial.
Okay.
The controls for the food itself, right?
Yeah.
Like calories and stuff.
Absolutely vital. They made sure all 3 meals, the pizza and both bento versions, were almost identical in calories, and also in the amount of protein, fat, and carbohydrates.
Right. So any differences they saw in eating speed couldn't be blamed on, like one meal being way heavier or having more fat.
Exactly. It isolates the effect. It lets them say, okay, the differences we're seeing must be down to the meal type or the eating sequence.
Clever. And how did they measure how people ate? Stopwatches.
A bit more high-tech than that. They used a wearable chewing sensor.
Whoa.
Yeah. And they video recorded the meals, too. So this let them get really precise data on, the total time it took to eat the meal, the total number of chews, how many bites people took, and even the chewing tempo, like how fast their jaw was moving.
Wow, okay. They really measured everything. So they've got this meticulous setup, precise measurements. What was the headline? What did the data yell out?
Well, the results were pretty clear-cut and maybe a bit challenging to some of the common advice we hear.
Okay.
The main finding was that the meal-type pizza versus bento had a much, much bigger impact on eating speed and chewing than the sequence of eating the vegetables in the bento.
Really? So all that emphasis on eat your salad first to slow down. This study suggests that might not actually be the biggest lever for the whole meal.
That's what their data showed. When they looked just at the bento meals, whether people started with the veggies or finished with them, it made no statistically significant difference to how long the whole meal took, or how many times they chewed overall.
Huh. That is genuinely surprising. So the kind of meal was the real king here. How big was the difference between the pizza and the bento?
Oh, it was significant. People ate the pizza way faster than either version of the bento.
Okay.
So shorter meal times for pizza and just substantially fewer chews needed.
And the bento, you mentioned chopsticks, separate bits of food.
Right. The bento meal, with its rice, veggies, the steak, all separate and needing chopsticks to pick things up. It just naturally made people take longer. Resulted in significantly more chewing compared to the pizza.
Right.
It seems like the actual physical structure of that meal just slowed things down.
Yeah, I can picture that. Picking up little bits with chopsticks versus, grabbing a whole slice of pizza. It's a completely different physical act. Did they notice any differences between the people in the study, like men versus women or younger versus older?
They did, yeah. They saw some demographic differences. For instance, men generally ate a bit faster and chewed less than women did.
Okay, that's sometimes reported.
But, and this is really important for the main point, both men and women showed the exact same pattern. They all ate the bento meals slower with more chewing than the pizza.
So the meal type effect was consistent across genders, even if their baseline speeds were different.
Precisely. The meal type impact held true.
What about age?
That was interesting, too. Older participants, in this study at least, tended to eat faster than the younger ones.
Faster, not slower.
Yeah, faster. The researchers sort of speculated this might be linked to things like dental health, maybe?
Yeah.
Or just age-related changes in chewing ability, making it, I don't know, less effortful or quicker. It's just a hypothesis, though.
Okay. Now, you mentioned something earlier that really goes against a common idea. What did they find about body mass index, BMI, and eating speed?
Yeah, this was really surprising. They found basically no significant link, no correlation between a person's BMI and how long it took them to eat these test meals.
Wow. Because you always hear that stereotype, right? That people with higher BMI just naturally eat faster.
Exactly. This study directly challenges that assumption, at least based on their data.
So if BMI itself isn't directly causing faster eating in their findings, how did Professor Iizuka and the team explain the connection we sometimes see between obesity risk and maybe faster eating habits? Is there another explanation?
That's where their interpretation gets really interesting. They suggest it's maybe not that the BMI causes faster eating directly.
Yep.
Instead, they hypothesize that maybe individuals with obesity are more likely to choose certain kinds of foods more often. Specifically, things like ultra-processed foods, energy-dense stuff, like pizza or fast food.
Foods that are basically designed to be easy and quick to eat.
Exactly. Foods that require less chewing, less effort. So the choice of those foods encourages the faster eating. And that faster eating pattern could then increase the risk of overeating. It flips the cause and effect a bit.
So it's less about an inherent speed linked to weight and more about the food environment and the types of foods chosen, which then dictate the speed.
That's their thinking. It's a subtle shift, but potentially quite important.
And Professor Iizuka really honed in on this idea of how the food is served, didn't he? As a key factor.
Yes, he emphasizes this a lot. He argues that a huge reason the meal type matters so much comes down to the simple mechanics of eating, how the food is actually prepared and presented to you.
Which brings us right back to the bento versus the pizza.
Precisely, the bento. It makes you work a little, right? You're using chopsticks, picking up small portions, bringing them to your mouth one by one. It's just inherently a slower, more deliberate process.
Right, takes more steps.
Whereas pizza, often eaten by hand, bigger bites maybe, designed for quick consumption, sometimes even on the move. That fundamental difference in the act of eating, which is driven by the serving style, seems to play a massive role in how long the meal takes.
It's like the foods format gives you hidden instructions. Eat me fast. Or take your time.
Kinda, yeah. A sort of behavioral nudge built into the meal.
Okay, so let's tie this back to health. You mentioned chewing tempo versus the number of chews. Can you just clarify that distinction again quickly?
Sure. So chewing tempo is like the rhythm, the speed your jaw moves, chews per second, say. The study suggests that rhythm is pretty fixed, maybe controlled by your brain, and it doesn't change much meal to meal.
But your basic chewing speed.
Right. But the total number of chews you take across the whole meal, or even per bite, and therefore the total time you spend actively chewing, that can change a lot. It depends on the food's texture, its structure, how you're eating it.
So bento equals more total chews, even if the chewing speed is the same.
Exactly. More chews, longer chewing time overall.
And why is that longer time, more chews, extending the meal, why is that actually good for us, health-wise, weight-wise?
Well, eating more slowly gives your body crucial time. Time for your gut to send signals to your brain saying, hey, food's arriving. And eventually, okay, I'm getting full.
The satiety signals.
Right. It allows those signals to catch up.
Yeah.
It can also lead to better digestion just because the food is more mechanically broken down before it even hits your stomach.
Makes sense.
And those factors together, Better satiety awareness, maybe better digestion. They're strongly linked to consuming fewer calories during that meal and better long-term weight management.
Okay, so given that maybe telling people count your chews
Yeah.
is hard to stick with.
Yeah, not very practical long-term for most people.
And focusing just on the eating sequence didn't seem to be the main driver in this study.
Oh.
What's the practical advice here? What's Professor Iizuka's takeaway?
His key suggestion is pretty neat, actually. If the goal is really to help people eat more slowly for health benefits, maybe the most effective route isn't hammering on how they chew, but instead guiding them towards choosing meals that, just because of how they're made and served, naturally require slower, more deliberate eating.
So engineer the situation rather than trying to micromanage the behavior second by second. Set yourself up for success by choosing the right kind of meal structure.
Precisely. Choose the bento over the pizza, maybe, if slowing down is the goal. He sees this as a simpler, maybe more powerful behavioral tool against things like obesity, metabolic syndrome conditions linked to overeating. It's about using the meal's design.
This deep dive really offers a clear, practical shift in perspective, doesn't it? Away from just willpower and rules about how to chew or when to eat things, towards simply choosing meals that are structured or presented in a way that automatically slows you down, like that bento example versus, say, a quick grab fast food meal. It supports healthier habits, almost without trying so hard.
Yeah, it puts the focus back on the food itself and the context you eat it in, not just on your conscious effort during the meal.
So the core message seems to be focusing on what we eat, and maybe even more powerfully, how that food is presented and needs to be eaten, could be a more practical, more effective, maybe more sustainable step towards better nutrition and well-being than just, battling our own eating pace directly.
It really makes you think about the subtle cues and how our food is served, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So here's something for you to maybe mull over this week. As you sit down to eat, just take a moment. Think about the type of meal you've chosen, or even just how it's served. Is it something you can eat really quickly, maybe with your hands? Or does it require utensils, maybe separate actions for each bite? How might that structure, without you even thinking about it, be influencing how fast you're eating?